Hey guys, Dark Humility here. You can always catch me at twitch.tv/Dark Humility for 6 to 7 days a week of Diablo 2 action of some kind, D2R, PD2, LOD, you name it. We do it all. Of course, we're going to be playing the D2R ladder and the PTR before that to do testing. You know how much I love testing if you've seen my channel. But yeah, anyway, you can always check us out for that live action anytime. And without further ado, today we have a special guide for you guys. This is the Strafe Amazon guide for D2R, which will be featured on d2.maxroll.gg in the written guide as well, which will have a lot more detail for you guys, so make sure to check that out. Timestamps will be put in the description below in the first pinned comment as well, for different sections of this guide. We'll be going over a standard Strafe Amazon and a starter Strafe Amazon. So we'll be going over like a high level gear and a low gear, so you guys can kind of see how it performs at different levels of gear, and you guys can change up your gear accordingly. So that's all really good stuff. I'll be doing this guide on my 1.13c, which is the current balance patches on D2R, on Pluggy, where I self-found all the items and whatnot. So we have all the items there, and of course you guys can check out what we have, but they're not going to be 100% perfect. So it's all self-found gear. It was on a finished Pluggy grill, so it's not 100% perfect, but in general, I think you guys get the idea as long as I explain kind of what's going on. On both the standard and the starter, we'll be going over the stats, the skills, and the mercenary gear, and we'll be doing demos in that order. Of course, in low player count and high player count, so you guys can see how she performs in each. And overall, one thing to mention, of course, about the Strafe Amazon is that this is overall a C tier build. It's not necessarily the strongest build in the universe currently. That could change with future balance changes in the future, which have not been announced. So you never know. Definitely looking pretty good for it overall, though. At any rate, she's really strong, despite no current balance changes that are announced. And yeah, she's a beast density destroyer. She could run chaos. She's a monster. She's really fun to play. And she could be even really fast on her feet. Alright, well, without further ado, let's get into the Strafe Amazon guide. Let's check it out. So, remember, of course, though, before we check this out, to check out d2.maxroll.gg again for all of your Diablo 2 needs, build guides, resources, a D2 planner where you can plan out your character with actual items and you can make your own builds, and tons of other resources as well, and tools to help you learn more about Diablo 2 and become a master ahead of the D2 ladder. Alright, anyway, that's it. So, without further ado, let's get into our level 95 Strafe Amazon here. So for stats, we have strength. You only put in enough strength to make sure you can wear all of your gear. That's all you need for strength. You don't need more, you don't need less. Just hit the strength requirements of all the items on your gear. That's all you really need to do. And of course, remember there's no strength bugging on the D2R anymore, so you cannot temporarily wear a piece of gear using its own strength, so you'll have to make sure you can wear everything accordingly. Dexterity. Alright, so this is the fun part about the Strafe Zone. Most builds, if you're going max block, you put in enough dexterity to go max block. If you're not, you don't put anything into dexterity. Strafe Zone and Multi-Shot Zone, which are both Amazons, both physical damage Amazons, they put in dexterity for damage. Every point to dexterity equates to physical damage on a boson. So you could theoretically just max out dexterity and you can max out your damage. I don't 100% recommend that. I recommend putting at least 75 points into vitality. You can put even more on hardcore if you don't feel comfortable with your health. Even with CTA on hardcore, if you go the hardcore version, which will be on the Maxroll guide. But yeah, there's a lot of things you can do. You don't need to put any points into energy, but really the decision comes is how many points you want to put into dexterity. So, overall, 474 points. That's a lot. We put almost all our points into dexterity, and she really benefits from that damage. The more damage, the better. You can easily get like 1.5k extra damage, maybe even more, just by stacking points into dexterity. And it makes the build a lot more fun because her damage otherwise might be lacking. You might feel a bit underwhelming. So that's why I definitely recommend on this build to really put lots of points into dexterity. And even if it wasn't, she could still use more damage. So put into it as needed. Max out your res as much as possible. However, res isn't insanely important on a very safe build such as this one, where you're mostly ranging from afar. You can get away with actually pretty trash res, which is what I'm going to have on the starter version of this character. But it still helps, and on hardcore, you definitely want to make sure res are max, or even stacked beyond that, so that conviction and lower res can't kill you. So let's kind of go over some of the other stats that are kind of important on this build. So damage reduction, once again, not in close range. You're not in melee range. You don't want to be in melee range. Not insanely important on a build like this. Like I said, you could stack your res on hardcore if you want to, but not super important. Other stats that can be important, Deadly Strike could be, but you already have a ton of Deadly Strike naturally using your Critical Strike skill. So you don't necessarily need any of this, but Deadly Strike could be a good stat. Crushing Blow will work at, I believe, half effectiveness from a ranger, so a ranged attack will only do half the damage from Crushing Blow. However, with Strafe firing very quickly, Crushing Blow can definitely add to your damage, especially against bosses, so this is definitely another stat you can go for. Not insanely important though, it's mostly that flat damage, you just want to get it insanely high. Alright, 32 faster hit recovery. This is not a hard cap you must hit. You can definitely hit lower breakpoints or higher breakpoints for faster hit recovery. But I do recommend having 32 because at 32 you at least can not be locked if you do end up in melee range and get hit by monsters, but you don't necessarily need to. You could even go 0. Once again, you're hitting from afar, so it's not a need. Faster run walk. As much as you possibly can stack on the build is not a bad idea. There's no breakpoints for it though, just fast run walk, grand charms, whatever. It's going to be nice. And then make sure you have at least one source of mana leech and one source of life leech. That'll definitely help with your quality of life a ton. And you can leech insanely fast with a very low health pool as we have here. We didn't put many points into vitality, and most of the time you don't want to. But not only that, it's just you do so much damage that you do leech very fast, and you cut through so many monsters that you're constantly leeching. So at least one source of each is nice. And the rest of the stats, MF, just as much Magic Find as you can on this build. This build isn't insanely good at stacking Magic Find though, not gonna lie. It can be very challenging to get damage and Magic Find along with some survivability all at once on a Strafe Amazon. And there's a couple of reasons why that is, we'll kind of go through the gear and whatnot and why that kind of is. But in general, at least having 100 MF is not a bad idea. Once you hit 100, it's definitely going to help your ability to find items a lot. And then 50 attack speed. So with our 15 fanaticism or a faith here, I think you just need 46 and you can hit the second frame down for max for guided arrow, but you only need 18 attack speed somewhere on your gear to hit the max frame for strafe. So you don't even need more than 18 necessarily, but if you want to improve guided arrow, you can hit 46, you can hit 92 just to be safe, 50 and 95 if your fanaticism aura isn't as high. But yeah, anyway, it's kind of up to you based on guided arrow and whatnot. It also helps multi-shot as a backup damage ability, which we'll talk about, to have more attack speed. But that being said, it's your fanaticism aura and your faith that is doing most of the work in regards to getting you your attack speed. So you don't really need all that much as long as you have fanaticism. If you're using the budget build, it's different. You definitely need a lot. But for this version of the build, it's not insanely important to have a ton of attack speed on your gear. You can have a little bit, you can have more in a little bit, and it will, of course, help you out with your ability to use guided arrow and multi-shot at higher frames. But Strafe will hit max frame with just 18 max frame on that one. So it's pretty crazy stuff. All right, enough about the stats and whatnot and kind of what you're looking for on a Strafe Amazon. Let's go into the skills. So we have a Strafe Amazon here with Max Strafe. What a surprise, right? Max Guided Arrow. This is your single target / boss killing ability. It also helps against physical immunes to train them down once they're amplified, or just to get them amplified to begin with. So it's really good stuff. These two skills are used quite a bit on this build. This one's used like the vast majority of the time, but yeah. Putting some extra points in a multiple shot besides just one is nice for a backup ability to clear up high density monsters, low HP monsters. So I like to put like 5 points into there, but for this it's kind of you could put more, you could put less. It's kind of just however you kind of feel about it and how much you actually want to use it. It's definitely a preference for that one. Alright, there's no points into the Javelin and Spear skill tree. And then this is another very important thing to max. This is what you're going to be arguably maxing second or third after Strafe. Definitely going to want to make sure Critical Strike is maxed or near max. You don't have to max it. It kind of depends on how many plus skills you have on your build. So technically I actually have too many points into this right now because it maxes out at 71% chance on my build. So at level 24 it would do that. So you don't have to necessarily max it out. It is a near max out. Not always a precise calculation though. Alright. Penetrate. For this version of the build, we only need 1 point. When we go over the starter build, you'll see that when we actually need more attack rating, we can put more in there. That's about that. Just one thing about Critical Strike, though, is that this is double damage. Double damage, so it's pretty key. And Pierce. Pierce, you're going to want at least 69% chance, so that's level 9. Since I had to put 3 points in to get level 9. With our gear, it's going to allow us to hit 100% Pierce chance, which is very important to Strafe because it pierces through everything. This is how you mow down whole armies of enemies. Got to make sure you have 100% Pierce, otherwise it's going to be a struggle on this build 100%. And then you want 3 points in each dodge, avoid, and evade. You can put more. You can even just leave it at 1. I like to have more though because you're ranging from afar. You shouldn't be getting hit, but if you do, you can completely negate the damage if you do end up getting hit. Since we don't have a lot of life, we can't take many hits in succession, so these can help us survive and get away, or at least fall back if necessary. Slow missiles against dangerous ranged enemies. 1 point to this will be pretty useful. Decoy. Honestly, when you're a really high level, just put the rest of your points into this, but it's not insanely important to level this up. It will help out Valkyrie's life, so it definitely boosts Valkyrie, which is why you want to max this last. Valkyrie is something that you want to max like in the middle. Second to last, or in the middle before you max Guided Arrow. Valkyrie, you want to make sure you have a tanky Valkyrie. We're not going to be using Call to Arms in this version of the builds. The Mercenary also won't have a lot of health, and neither will the Valkyrie. So she really needs as much health as possible from points into the skill in order to tank damage and serve as a front line. Your Mercenary and your Valkyrie and your decoys are your front line. So you're definitely going to need those as much as possible. Alright. Mercenary. The Mercenary just needs to be a Might or a Mercenary, so Nightmare Offensive Act 2. In the future, you might be able to buy all the mercenaries in both Nightmare and Hell, and D2R, which is something that's already been announced. So look out for that. Of course, just look out for a Might Mercenary. That's really what you want, is a Might Act 2 Mercenary. That will make it a lot stronger, and it'll be good stuff in general. Now, as for the Mercenary's gear, this is one of the only builds that I'd ever recommend this item on, period. Pride. So, Pride is going to give us, in addition to Might Aura, which boosts our damage, it's going to give us a second damage aura, and we actually have a third one on our own gear, so it's a triple aura threat that is provided by this Pride here. This is a perfect roll. It rolls 16 to 20 concentration aura. Just more attack rating, more damage. It's pretty insane stuff. It even gives a chance that our attacks are uninterruptible. It's just really, really strong. The main weakness of this weapon, though, is it has no damage, and on top of that, it also blinds targets, which can mess with proccing amplify damage on targets, which is something we'll kind of go over in the gameplay. But yeah, very strong stuff, very good stuff. It's definitely an interesting weapon, though. You could also go Reaper's Toll, though, and then you can go like High Lords on your Amulet, and you could go for the negative 50% physical res on your Mercenary instead of the negative 100%, which is slightly lower chance on your Amulet. But I don't really like that on this build, and I'll kind of, explain that when I go over our main gear. But anyway, Pride is really good. Just provides a reliable aura. No matter where he's at, pretty much, he's going to be able to give you this aura, and that's going to be good stuff. Craft Stop. F upgraded. So just get as high of a defense shaft stop as possible. You could definitely go like Leviathan or something. I like shaft stop, though, just 30% damage reduction. And then, of course, combined with Vampire Gaze, you get 50% damage reduction. The Vampire Gaze will also give you Life Leech. And this will give you life. You can put res jewels in them, so your Mercenary ends up having maximum res. That can be challenging on these two items because there's no res on these items and there's no res on this item. So you're probably going to need some res jewels or runes in this. I just have res jewels. You could definitely go more extreme on this build for sure. But overall, the goal of the Mercenary is to be an aura bot. He's got might, he's got concentration. He can freeze targets with this as well. He doesn't leech super well, but it does give him a chance to do double damage with the 20% deadly strike. So it's not all that bad. But overall, he is not really meant to be dealing your damage. He is meant to be there simply to give you auras, and he's meant to survive, which is why we got lots of damage reduction on him, because he can't leech very effectively. It's just important that he can absorb as much damage as possible. Alright, so that's it for the Mercenary. Let's kind of get into our own gear here. So this is the third aura that we're going to be using, which is Faith. Faith Grand Matron Bow. This is a classic bow that many people, of course, have seen many times. Gives you a ton of damage. And with this bow, you get maximum damage. This bow has the highest amount of damage you can get, in combination with decent attack speed frames. And with the level 15 Fanaticism aura, you're going to be doing even more damage. It's got ignore target defense as well, which means attack rating or hitting the monsters isn't that big of a deal. And it'll even help you out with your front line by animating a lot of dead monsters as returned enemies. So it's really, really good. Very strong stuff. Of course, it also gives 5 to bow skills, which is important because you don't really get plus skills anywhere else in your build. So make sure to use a 4-socketed 3 bow and crossbow skill base, 4-socket GMB, and that's going to be good. Now, there's a lot of other things you can use as a weapon that are near as effective or not as effective at all, but depending on your budget, of course. So let's go over Wind Force. So Wind Force is very close to as strong as this. And if you were an Act 1 Mercenary, you can get Fanaticism still. on an Act 1 Mercenary, and you can wear Wind Force, and the damage is almost as high. Wind Force has way higher base damage, but it means they're going to have less auras. And after it all washes out, it does appear through, the damage calculations, whatnot, and testing, that Wind Force is a slightly weaker approach. So slight, in fact, that I still recommend it, and it's a really strong weapon you could potentially use on this build. A more basic approach is would be using a upgraded Bariza. I'm going to be attacking a lot slower with it. However, it still hits really hard. It does a ton of damage as a crossbow. That's going to be on the starter setup. You can also use like upgraded Wild Witch string bow. You can use Gold Strike Arch. There's a lot of things you can use. One of the things about upgraded Witch Wild String Bow, though, is it procs amp at a pretty relative frequency, which is going to be important for upping your damage on any version of this build. However, the damage, the actual DPS, the actual damage on it is way lower. So there's a lot of other options, of course, you can use. You can use a crazy rare bow as well. That even has a chance to cast amplify damage, potentially with tons of enhanced damage. There's a lot of things you could do. But this is the most reliable, and this is going to be the strongest setup overall. So I'm going to show you guys how that works here. Well, at least depending on what you're going for. With a nice balance of damage, survivability, magic, finding that kind of stuff. Alright, Fortitude. Fortitude is definitely going to give you the most damage on this setup. Period's the 300% enhanced damage stat that you're really looking for on this. Of course, you also get a decent amount of res, and it even helps you out with max light res, which can be good, especially for running World Stone Keep. Even gives you some much needed HP, because you really struggle with HP on this build, as you can see. So yeah, it's going to be a pretty good choice. Of course, for being even tankier and possibly for getting more res on hardcore, you're probably going to want to look into Chains of Honor. And then there's a lot of things that are much more budget, including what we're going to be wearing in the starter, which is Lionheart. So yeah, but from here though, like Fortitude's going to be best in slot. Alright, so one thing to note about Giant Skull. So depending on where you have your knockback in this build is kind of how you determine your helm, your gloves, your weapon even. Wind Force has knockback. So you need at least one source of knockback. If you don't, it's going to be a lot more painful in this build. Your Mercenary and your Valkyrie are going to be taking too much damage. You're going to get overrun. Being able to knock back the monsters is very key to making this build as safe and effective as possible. So it can be on the bow, like I said, Wind Force can have it. It can be on the gloves. You could have hit power gloves, which is a crafting recipe. And you could have it on the helm. And on the helm, it is on Giant Skull. Giant Skull is really solid. You can have up to 2 sockets on this thing for more enhanced damage jewels. You can get your attack speed with attack speed enhanced damage jewels like in this one. And of course, it even gives you some crushing blow, which can be nice against bosses. Overall, though, just providing those 2 slots for the jewels, knockback, and some crushing blow, and even some extra strength, which isn't a bad thing. It's going to be really, really nice on this build. Very, very nice. So yeah, it's solid stuff having a Giant Skull. I like Giant Skull. This is what I kind of prefer on this build. Because for the gloves, I like having a 350% damage to demons on my gloves. Which is just really huge, especially in areas like Chaos. And also being able to get that attack speed and the fire resistance. Resistance can be a really tough thing to get on a Strafe Amazon. So overall, I really like Giant Skull quite a bit. But let's say you have knockback elsewhere, you can use a Artisan's Tiara of Speed. You can go like attack speed, 80 jewels, 3 of them, in a 30 faster run walk helm, which can increase your faster run walk, which is really nice. You could definitely do a lot of things in this build to make it a lot stronger. And then of course, There are other options as well. So you can also use G-Face. G-Face is another prominent option, which I feature in some of the variants on the Maxroll guide, just because it gives you a ton of Crushing Blow and more Deadly Strike, which will even increase your chance of doing double damage even further, and it gives you faster hit recovery on the helm itself. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you can play with here. Definitely a lot of different things you can play with. You can of course increase your faster hit recovery even more doing that. But overall, I like Giant Skull. I think it's a great option as long as you have good jewels, and it works really well with laying of hands and whatnot. All right, so this is the linchpin of the build here. Besides the triple auras, unless you're going Reaper's Toll on the Mercenary and you have Decrepify for that extra physical damage applied to monsters and the slow and whatnot, and even the ability to break physical immunities. Both Decrep and Amp can do this. Amp can do it more reliably, though. Amp is twice as strong as Decrepify, and you can apply it yourself with your own bow. That's why I like this. Now, it's 5% chance, though, on a single strike, but you attack so fast with multiple arrows through multiple monsters that this thing procs a lot. And, Atmoscarab is truly no joke. I think it's 100% best in slot on a Strafe Amazon. Multi-shot doesn't really work like that because only the middle arrows actually proc anything, and that includes amplify damage. So for multi-shot, you wouldn't want to use Atmoscarab. You just go probably like High Lords, and you can of course use Reaper's Toll. But for Strafe, I prefer just having 3 auras and Amplify on yourself because it's way more reliable on a Strafe Amazon. You can go though High Lords. You can still use the Reaper's Toll approach, but I think this approach just does way more damage, and it really allows this build to destroy things even in high player count. And that's the key. So this item brings the build to the next level. On swap, you're going to want to use a Harmony. Ideally, it's not the same shape so that you can tell when you're on your swap, but that's not how I did it in this case. So ideally, it looks different than your main hand Faith weapon, but that's okay. You can make it in any bow you want. It doesn't even have to be an Amazon bow. Of course, it gives you extra Valkyrie skills, so you're going to want to cast your Valkyrie on your Harmony bow swap. And it has, of course, the level 10 Vigor Aura. So this is what you swap to for traveling. Now you might notice here, I am running insanely fast. This build is not all about the teleport. You could put teleport on this build, but I'd actually just recommend not doing that. There's a lot of easy ways to get faster runwalk, including the helm, which I mentioned earlier. You get it on your boots. Heck, you could even wear Enigma instead of Fortitude if you wanted to, which can still help you out in a lot of other ways, such as Magic Find, and faster runwalk. Won't give you quite as much damage as Fortitude, but it's not too bad. And at any rate, faster runwalk is incredible, even when you don't have as much as you could have. You could even have a Cat's Eye here, and you could use like Reaper's Toll under Mercenary, and then you could have more faster runwalk. So there's a lot of options for faster runwalk, but only with a little bit of faster runwalk, or just some faster runwalk on your charms. You can see how fast I'm running around with Vigor. And imagine you can run even faster than this if you put on even more faster runwalk. So this swap is for traveling and for getting away and putting distance between you and the enemies. Most builds just use CTA, but you know, especially on the softcore, if you're not super concerned with it and if you keep your distance, you're not going to die that often as long as you keep your distance from the enemies. So you don't necessarily need that extra health and mana. The mana is almost completely useless on this build, if completely useless entirely. And because of the mana leech that you have, which would come from a ring, I recommend it on a ring. Of course, you can have your leeches on crafted gloves. You can have the mana leech on wind force. So there's definitely other places you can have it. But the ring is really nice for this. And you get your leeches, you get more attack rating, even though you kind of don't really need it on this build because you put so many points into dex. And then magic damage reduced by 2 and like cold resistance and things like that. So really solid stuff having both sources of leech. We talked about that. I put it on my ring. It can also have Life Leech on Nosferatu's Coil, which can give you more attack speed as well. But if you do that, you're gonna have to put a lot more points into Pierce to hit that at least have 100%. With 69 plus this, we have 100%. If you don't have this, you're gonna have to be wearing Barizza, which has 100%, and then you don't even need Pierce at all. Of course, you can just stuff more points into Pierce instead of Decoy, Valkyrie, or Guided Arrow. If you're interested, of course, in foregoing Razor Tail and using something like Nosferatu's Coil or Gold Wrap or whatever you want to use instead for other types of stats. But overall, this is an insanely good belt. Gives you 15 dexterity, which just adds to your damage. Gives 10 maximum damage, which adds to your damage. And it gives all the Pierce that you need. You want 100% Pierce in this build. And then Raven Frost. So Raven Frost mostly is here for the dexterity. Gives some cold damage, which is nice to have that reliable cold damage. And then, of course, some survivability stats. It's got more attack reading. It's kind of overkill in this build for sure, but what it is. And then the really important stat, which is cannot be frozen. Since we're getting our attack speed elsewhere, this is probably just going to hands down be your best source of cannot be frozen on this build. So, I really shirk away from saying something an item is required for a build, but this kind of is. Kind of need a Raven Frost. War Traps, that 15 to 25 flat damage, and any amount of magic find you can get on it is going to be nice no matter what. Some Strength and Vitality is good as well, just for boosting your life, which is in sore need, and giving you a decent amount of faster run walk. You really can't go wrong with these boots. Against single targets and other things, you can use like Gore Riders if you want more Crushing Blow and Deadly Strike. But overall, I think this will do the most amount of damage most of the time. And that's just how it is. Goblin Toes can give you even more, but then there's no faster run walk. Give you even more Crushing Blow. In general, you just want that damage. All those damage boots, and this one's definitely going to be the best one in most situations. Alright. And then Charms. So there's a lot of options for Charms. The ones I show on the Maxroll guide are more geared towards like faster hit recovery, damage, attack rating like these ones, but not the faster run walk type. Faster run walk type are totally valid though. Trying to get more faster run walk on this build, just to have more mobility, is very important on a build that doesn't want to get hit and that wants to run fast and that is not using teleport. There's no source of teleport. Even if you use Enigma, your teleport frames are awful on an Amazon, so you're usually going to be better off just running on this build because that's just how it is. There are ways to get faster cast rate on this build. You could even use a rack here. You could use like a 20 FCR to like attack speed ED jeweled helm even, and you can get some decent faster cast rate frames. But even those decent frames might only be somewhat faster than just running, and it can put you in way more danger as you don't want to be telestomping on this build. So I'm not really sure, but you can definitely do that. At any rate, I decided to go with a medley of res, fast run walk, damage, attack rating, magic find, damage, attack rating, hit recovery, life, fast run walk. You get the idea. And then of course Geeds, because it's so good for the MF. It's like best in slot. And then have an Amazon Torch and an Annihilus Charm. As good of stats as you possibly can get on those. Some of these charms you might even notice are just like pure damage. And you can definitely go the pure damage approach as well. These charms are pretty incredible. Since you don't necessarily need the life, because once again you're attacking from afar, you can actually just get maximum damage. 14 max damage charms are 100% possible if you've never seen these before. I even have another one in my stash that only got to 13. It means that you need to get like both the sharp stat and one of the other stats, which is maiming. So you need sharp of maiming. You need both of the max damage stats on the same charm. Those are kind of tough to get. But overall, just max damage is going to be good. Attack rating is going to be good. Mostly you don't need attack rating. Mostly just going for the max damage on this build. Faster unlock. Resistances can be good. And magic find, just whatever balance kind of suits you. A lot of people ask about like bow GCs. You don't use bow GCs on this build. So bow GCs are good for elemental zones, like elemental arrow zones, like freezing arrow. They won't give you more damage than max damage charms. Another kind of charm that isn't really going to help you out too much is a passive GC. But even a passive GC would be better than a bow GC on this build, because at least it could make your Valkyrie tankier. It can give you points into dodge, avoid, and evade without, putting them in yourself. Same thing with critical strikes. So even those would actually help out your build more than bow GCs. But if you just want damage, you just want to be strong, this is what you do. Just get max damage charms, as many as you can, and then whatever other stats that you're looking for. Of course, the hit recovery, hitting 32% break point on her. It's all good to go. Alright, so we went over our gear, the mercenary gear, the skills, and the stats. I know that often takes a while. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do a Players 1 demo first. So we're going to show you guys how strong she is. Players 1. So when you start out, you can just walk around, switch to your Harmony bow to run. This is how you get places fast. Also use that to cast your Valkyrie. You can even do that in town though. And we are running as fast as Sonic. Run like the wind, lady. Run like the wind. Like the wind. Okay. So as you can see, she shreds in Players 1. No problem. So remember, of course, before you attack, to swap back to your Faith Bow or whatever your main weapon is. Attacking with your Harmony is very ineffective. Harmony doesn't do nearly as much damage as Faith. So that's almost a physical immune monster there. You can proc Amp on them though, that's always nice. Alright, so this is a situation you kind of want to avoid. If you get surrounded, you can put down a decoy, you can run away again. So as you can see, Amp procs quite a bit. There's another Amp proc there. Procced again. Amp is 100% negative enemy physical res. It's huge damage. Very important stuff. As you can see, she clears density very reliably and quickly. See, I'm getting a bit surrounded there. Kind of listen to the auras and see which one you're on, but as you can see, she rips through stuff pretty fast. But this is just Players 1, of course, though. So our damage is 6,000, but with Amp you can do 12,000. With enough max damage, you can get like to 13,000 damage on the high end. One of the problems with this build, though, being like an A tier and S tier build, though, is the damage variance is pretty high. Besides, of course, not having a good means of teleport mobility or having a great means of magic find stacking. Which, I mean, besides this and a couple of other things, it can be hard to get magic find on a very effective version of this build. Of course, Enigma can always help with that as well. Even if you don't use it for the teleport. Enigma can help with anything though. Enigma's just incredibly strong. So this is an important thing to know here. So we could use multi-shot, of course, as well. Multi-shot, you don't need all the skills into it. One thing to note about it is that the damage doesn't scale on level, only the number of arrows. So that's kind of neat. You kind of just get a free multi-shot as well if you want it. And as you can see, multi-shot is pretty dang effective. Of course, against really strong enemies, Strafe just hits them harder. But against like low HP, high density enemies, it's not a bad idea just to use multi-shot as well. And you can just use it on the same build as a backup. But where Strafe really shines though compared to multi-shot is high player count. But we'll get to that once we start testing high player count. I just want to show you guys some low player count tests first. There's another area that's pretty strong for her. Arguably her strongest area is Chaos Sanctuary. Another max level area like the pit. But yeah, you can see though, we gun him down fast. We're not hitting the max attack speed frame for multi-shot though, so that is one of the issues. Undead monsters can't be leeched, so that's always something to note. I have to use some mana potions every once in a while. Having some Jews down there, health potions and mana potions are going to be useful. As you can see though, we gun those down in a split second. One thing to note about Strafe is the more monsters there are, the better. You might notice that Strafe does really well against groups of monsters, especially if they're caught in a line like this. So like narrow corridors are not bad. The pit has pretty narrow corridors. Arguably Chaos has even better corridors though. And Worldstone also does, which will also be showing off in Players 1 here. So yeah, as you can see, most of the time, we're not worried about getting hit. If you're worried about running headlong into monsters, though, you can always cast Decoy, and then the monsters will attack that first. Decoy won't move, it's just going to absorb damage, just like your Valkyrie and your Mercenary. You can use all the tools in your front line. Maybe we'll see an opportunity to use slow missiles, I don't know. Chaos, you don't really need slow missiles, it's mostly for like, honestly, like Black Souls and Archers in the pit would be pretty good with it. Notice how good that knockback is, though. Now, while I don't advise going into melee range against monsters too much, you can always just use your knockback to your advantage. And see how knockback just tears them to shreds. They can't really attack you all that often or get that close to you as long as you have knockback somewhere under here. In addition to the amplify damage, you can kind of see that. There you go, put a decoy down, he was extra fast. Didn't matter. Alright, we got amp 2. Looks like they know the same tactics we do. There you go, proc the amp on him. Toast. Sweet. Alright, so Chaos is no problem on this character whatsoever. A lot of people think Bosons are just garbage, but they definitely are a lot stronger than I think a lot of people think. Alright, so this is where Guided Arrow really comes handy. You don't have a lot of health, so I don't recommend getting biffed by Diablo too much. Oh no. That can definitely be a bit of a problem. But notice that I can even off-screen him, pretty much. I didn't get lucky there, I didn't amp him, but... you don't have to. Now, we're just starting to run out of arrows, so, of course, you can pick up arrows along the way like normal, or you can just buy them here and there. We didn't go through arrows too fast, though, did we? Not really. So Guided Arrow, more effective against Diablo. He has a lot of defense and whatnot. Ignore target defense also doesn't work against him. Bosses can also block in a lot of cases. Guided Arrow always hits, besides block, so it completely ignores any attack rating. It's like Smite, but from afar. So Guided Arrow is going to be really effective against Diablo. That being said, in Players 1, you could just use Strafe against Diablo, and it might even increase your chance of proccing Amp. You can also do it in Players 8 as well. Diablo, you can use Strafe if you want. But Guided Arrow is very reliable, so... See, we can even use Guided Arrow here. You can see it's actually quite nice. Oh, except we're not attacking with our Faith currently. Alright. Be mindful of what bow you're on, right? Alright, so this can be a bit of a problem. We got a physical immune monster here. And of course we procced Amp on the wrong monster. But then we just procced Amp with Strafe. Sometimes it's easier just to hit them with Guided Arrow though. So it's not a bad idea to have that at the ready. I almost got wrecked there. Alright. So we got some physical immunes in Worldstone 3. Worldstone 3 can be a bit of a problem sometimes. This is my favorite max level area in the game, of course, but... it can be a little problematic, this one. For a Strafe Song, because there are a lot of physical immunes in here. But notice that if I proc Amp against these things, they get destroyed. Alright, so you can see there. This is why we don't want to get hit ever if possible. Alright, here we go. Use that Harmony bow to outmaneuver. Usually you're so fast they can't do anything, so... he's amped, he's toast. Even the physical immunes get toasted as long as we amp them. That's one of the reasons why Atmos is so effective on this build. Of course, among many. The rapid firing is actually reliable to proc it, despite it only being 5%. Alright. Might want to be careful for the dolls. As you can see though, Players 1 is just... she doesn't even break a sweat in here. Yeah, don't blow those up in your face, otherwise you're gonna regret it. If you just pick up the arrows and she says she's overburdened, that's all you need to do. It'll refill your arrows. As you can see, we're back to 350-ish. Alright. So you can always put a decoy up in the waves. Now, the waves just get melted. Attack! So yeah, Strafe, if you have 100% Pierce, you might notice that we just slaughter everything in front of us. Very powerful attacks. Now, Bale, she struggles a bit against Bale, so once we get to Bale, you'll see that. You might even want to skip Bale if you want to. Bale can be a bit of a problem, but, you know, as long as you use Guided Arrow, you're fine. Diablo is one of those ones where you could use Strafe or Guided Arrow against, but... Bale, you're definitely going to want to use Guided Arrow. It'd be very challenging to kill Bale with Strafe. You need that guaranteed hit, pretty much. Unless Bale blocks it. Alright, there you go. Alright, so we're about to conclude the Players 1 demo. Now I'm going to demo her in higher player count. So you can see how she performs in a party or / player 7 or 8 in single player. Alright, so as you can see, as long as we use a guided arrow, it's not bad. We even amped him. Perfect. Yeah, he takes a while. But it's not that bad, as you can see. You know, it could be a lot worse. Just make sure you don't fight him in high player count unless you're with friends. Otherwise, it's going to be a pain.
Good to see you.
All right. Good to see us. All right. So now, guys, let's do high player count demo. So high player count means like players 5 through 8, you know, it's not low, it's not 1 through 4, it's 5 through 8, but we're gonna do player 7, which is the highest player count for drops. Just to show you guys just how ridiculously strong this build can really be. So players 1's one thing, but her powers are actually not that much lower, even with the monsters having way more health and way more damage. This is where it gets a lot more dangerous though, so if I die, well, that can definitely happen. Well, we'll see what's going on. Amp is actually more likely to proc 2 in high player count because the monsters have more health. Which is one of the reasons why it's not that big of a deal necessarily to do high player count, because we have the amp at our disposal. Alright, so Harmony, just run down here. Remember, we're in player 7 now. We'll see the monsters a lot stronger now. What are we hitting over here? So there you go. You saw us get a pretty quick amp on them. They got wrecked. Also a quick amp on those. It hardly looks different from players 1, right? Not that different. This is where she really shines. The power of Strafe is actually pretty incredible. Alright, so as you can see, good place to use slow missiles there. They had amp, they had a lot of damage, they're gonna kill the Mercenary. Slow missiles isn't really that necessary in P1 period, but you can still use it. If you're ever in a full party though, you can't afford that. Okay, killed a bunch of champions. Yeah, you can definitely see how there's a difference. The amp is a bit of RNG for sure, but overall it's very, very strong stuff. Alright, so we got decoy. See the monsters though, they're pretty hard. Now possessed kind of suck because you can't kill them with amp. You can focus them down with guided arrow if they're the only monster left if you really want to. So notice how we just amp those monsters right there. Amp really makes it easy even in high player count. Makes your damage enormous. Gets to that 12, 6, 13k effective damage.
Hello.
Which is what you want. Every arrow splits into 5, and those 5 arrows go through everything. Every one of those arrows is a chance to proc that amp. Every one of those split arrows. It's 5 at every shot. This is another one of her strongest areas. Of course, we went over it in Players 1. Now you're probably wondering, can she run Chaos? Now these grotesques can be a bit of a problem because they're highly physical resistant, but you amplify them, it's not that bad. As you can see, though, it's not necessarily the most absurdly fast clear, high density clearer in the universe. But it's very strong. If you ever find yourself alone because your mercenary or Valkyrie don't want to follow you, remember you can always do that. Aw, man, got amp on the wrong monsters. Steel Fang to OP, man. We're not proccing amp on him. Oh, there we go. We're getting amp on all the other monsters, rip. Yeah, he was stone skinned, so I really need that physical damage reduction on him.
I am overburdened.
Rip. Oh shit, I'm firing on a Harmony. You guys can see there's a pretty major damage difference. If I go to my Harmony bow, it was like 1,500 damage. That scales on amp and everything else. I don't even think I have the attack speed then too, because I'm not gonna even fire as many arrows. Alright. So as you can see, we can carry a full group of people in here. This is player 7 once again. You could also do this with multi-shot. I really like Strafe though, because the damage is no joke. It hits really hard, and it procs amp way more reliably. And it can proc it on all the monsters in a greater field of, greater area. Whereas Decrep can only hit monsters in a very narrow zone. %71 chance to do double damage. Alright, so this is one of those situations where you could just use guided arrow and it might be more effective. But, you know, some of these situations it's pretty hard to tell. It's really close. But even with just 841 health, you can see most of the time we're just fine. It's when we're not that it could be the problem. So as you can see, one of the weaknesses of this build is if you get surrounded or there's too many monsters in too many directions, it can take a little bit of a while to kill them. But considering this is player 7, that's not too bad. Of course, the sooner we proc amp on any of them, the faster they go down. Alright. Just notice how I'm always switching to Harmony to travel around. It's hard to just abandon monsters in here, but it's okay. You don't really have to. Corridors are narrow enough to where most of the time you're good. But you can see, though, every individual arrow doesn't really do that much damage. Unless they're amped, and then it hits really hard. Alright. Oh god. That's dangerous. Valkyrie, get in there. Even had to recast Valkyrie that time. Yeah, if they even hit me once, I'm probably dead in P7. Maybe. Did we kill him? Oh, we did. Okay. So yeah, we have all the tools to survive that and to destroy them. Even an extra fast to say. So that's a good thing to demo there. Not something I planned. My res are pretty solid though, so even if they hit me like once or whatnot, hit me a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. But, you know, you can also, instead of having res, you can have even more damage. Which I wouldn't blame you. Much damage as you could possibly get, you know. Amp is amazing. Alright, so get some arrows. Fade them out. So this you might think, oh wow, they're gonna kill you. You don't do enough damage. It's like, no, it's fun. One thing to note that you could definitely use multi-shot, but look how little damage it does. Alright, so Diablo in Player 7 is it's gonna be hard.
Not even death can save you from me.
You might die. Now see. Ow. Rock and please. There we go. See, notice how I can use Strafe too. But notice once I get the amp up though, guided arrow might be more reliable. And then I don't sit in one spot, which is another weakness of Strafe. Well, the main weakness of Strafe is you have to stand perfectly still while you're firing it. Oh my god, we're gonna die. No potions, no. You can even use like switch between bows here. There we go. And Player 7 Diablo even can be soloed by a Strafe Amazon. Alas, probably not the cleanest Player 7 Diablo kill you've ever seen. But, hey, I mean, not bad. Now as for Bale, we're not going to do Bale in Player 7 because that would just take forever. Also be insanely dangerous. Alright, so you might be asking, well, alright, some of her strongest areas can be good, but what about the endgame stage, Worldstone Keep? Can she still do that in Player 7? Yeah, she can. Alright. Gotta make use of slow missiles in here, especially when they're souls, though. You might be noticing that our health isn't going down very fast. You may be thinking, what? You only have 800 health? No, that's Fortitude. 5% maximum light res is not a bad stat to have, as you can see. But see, one thing about souls, though, is they have a lot of physical resistance, so getting that amplify is pretty key. Even in Player 7, we can hold our own. Even one of the most dangerous areas in the game, Worldstone Keep. 1. And as you can see, we can even blast him down. Even on high player count. Get all those amplify procs. Nice. So yeah, I mean, not bad, right? That's a little too close for comfort. Yeah, you can see. They can two-shot me. Of course, all that dodge chance, though, isn't going to waste. Whether I'm running or walking, attacking, a ranged enemy or attacking a melee enemy. Every time I go into that dodge animation, they can't do any damage. So you make a lot of use of those dodge animations here. I don't recommend them for builds like the Javazon that get a little bit closer to the monsters, but for a build like this one where you're not intentionally trying to get hit all the time, maxing out that Valkyrie and getting an actual useful front line is actually quite nice. Sometimes I gotta check which bow I'm on. Should've just made it in a different base, man. Sometimes not enough thinking.
I can't carry anymore.
Ah, shit. Ah, schmokes. Yeah. She can hold her own, as you can see, though. Now, if World Stone 3 gets those physical immune spawns, that can be a bit challenging. Yeah. Oh, we got one of them. Damn. So what you can do here is you can just gun them down with Amplify if you want. That could take a while, though. What I'd recommend doing... Ah, damn, we got even one of the other spawns. Seeing if you can outrun them. Oh! Ooh, wow. That's a little challenging. Yeah, just outrun him. Outmaneuver him. Physical immunes in Players 8 are no fun. In Players 1 it's one thing, but... for Players 7, which is what we're in now. But Player 7, even with Amplify, it can be quite difficult to kill them. It'll take a while. If you don't have forever, well then you don't have forever. Mind you, remember, this is simulating a near max player's game, so this is no joke. Knockback combined with everything else can totally make this build clear a large amount of monsters. Not the quickest, but... you also have a lot of safety, too. Now in hardcore, if you wear CTA instead of Harmony, you can make it work very well. You might have to sacrifice some faster run walk, but that's okay. There's wave 2 down in player 7. Yeah, getting souls is not very lucky. One of the highest physical resistance monsters you can get. It's not even their missiles that are super bad. I mean, you can die for them, but you use slow missiles and you have 80% light res. And you have dodge, you should be fine. Or avoid, I should say, for those. So yeah, this is not a joke. The more densely packed the monsters are, the better. Really take them down. Take him down a notch. Oh. There you go. Player 7 minions of destruction down. But, you know, once again for Bale, I really don't recommend doing it solo like that. Even past players 1. It's gonna take a long time.
My brothers will not have died in vain.
Oh, Bale. Man. Bale's a pain. Well, we hit pretty hard, so... I can even kill him off screen. See, I don't even see him in his health. It's going down. Strafe's incredible for killing things off screen, just slaughtering. Look at that. Damn. I could just face tank the clone too, no problem. Life Leech is gonna save me. Let's go. Alright, so that's about it. I mean, she could do a lot of things. There's so many other areas that we can do, of course. I recommend checking the Maxroll guide to really see all of her strong potential areas. You could even take down cows with it, but yeah, it can be a little tougher though because the monsters don't have a pretty higher HP in there. But yeah, no problem. Went down from player 7 to players 1 for Bale. That's about it. The rest of it was player 7. She is a beast, and don't underestimate what she can do. She can totally run stuff. Is it going to be the fastest runs ever? No. She's definitely significantly weaker than, for instance, her sister, Lightning Fury Amazon, but pretty beastly build. So that was the standard build. Now, I feel like it could be quite useful to go over the not standard build. So, the budget build. So the budget build, pretty much the same thing. You need enough strength to wear gear for stats. Dexterity, pretty much just as many points as you could spare for damage. Vitality, it's gonna be, you know, honestly I recommend putting more points into Vitality on this build because you don't have enough health anywhere else, so you might have to put some more in it and then none into energy. Notice our res aren't very good. You can definitely make them better with more res charms versus like attack rating damage charms, but you really need attack rating on this build. This build struggles unless you use like Angelic, but with Angelic you can't proc Amp. I don't know. You could definitely go Angelic though. Angelic could work for a very low level. You can see though our attack speed is much higher. You could even get higher than this and get an even higher attack speed frame. Putting a shale in this would be nice. I didn't even put a shale in this. These are just basic items, basically. Very basic stuff. But yeah, as much hit recovery as you can possibly get. Deadly Strike's going to be good. We don't have Fanaticism, we don't have Faith, we don't have any of those auras except for the Might aura on the Mercenary itself. We give him Obedience because the Mercenary is actually going to want to help with our damage on this build. He does a lot of damage with Obedience, and it's a pretty cheap it's a really strong cheap option for only having like a foul rune. It's pretty cool. And of course then you have Treachery here for more attack speed and, you know, life leech and res. So this is a combination of res, attack speed, res from Fade when struck, life leech, maybe some damage reduction in case you get like Vampire Gaze, but that's not as budget as this is. It's a little bit more expensive. And Obedience, which doesn't require higher than a foul rune. The base is the hardest part of Obedience, to 5-socket Ethereal, but it's easier to get 5-socket Ethereal elite bases than it is 4-socket by a large margin, because there's some that max out at 5, like Threshers. So you could just use large sockets to get that. And yeah. So we also don't put 100 stat points in because I'm trying to simulate like a level 75 Xana if possible here. Skills, it's pretty much the same deal, except you really don't emphasize Guided Arrow. You really just want to emphasize the Strafe for clearing. You really want to be able to clear those basic starter areas that she's capable of clearing. And then, you know, you max out Strafe here. You max out Penetrate. You need attack rating. As you can see, my attack rating is not insanely high anymore. We also don't have Ignored Target Defense. You max out Crit Strike. You still only get 68%. Almost as high as the standard build, though. So, still getting a lot of double damage. And then, you know, just put the rest of the points into Valkyrie so you have some kind of a tank. Of course, as we level up more and we put more skill points in, we have 20 remaining. You know, you can fill out your Guided Arrow, you can fill out your Valkyrie, you can put more points into dodges. You might notice here we also don't put a point into Pierce. One of the differences, of course, besides maxing out Penetrate, besides not putting as many points in the dodges because we just don't have them, is that, and that's because of Bariza. Bariza has 100% chance to pierce, so it's pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff. It pierces very well. It also does a ton of damage. So yeah, Bariza does a ton of damage. Beastly. Really can't go wrong there. He's strong. Very strong. Alright. Then you have G-Face, Lionheart, Atmas, Ortravs. Ortravs, you could just get a 30 MF one. I still like Atmas on this version of the build, but you know, you could use High Lords for more Deadly Strike. And then you could use Reaper's Toll in the Mercenary if you want to, but once again, that Reaper's Toll proc is going to be very unreliable. I still like Atmas. Atmas isn't super expensive usually, so that's going to be a good thing. Lionheart, highest rune, once again, it's another foul rune. It's a nice res armor that gives damage, it gives attributes, it gives requirements. Pretty solid stuff. Doesn't require a lot. Gives some extra life, which you desperately need. It gives strength and dex that you desperately need for life or more damage. It's pretty solid basic armor here. You could also use like Durus and things like that. You could even use Smoke for something really budget. I really recommend Bariza for budget, but like, you know, up Wild Witch String procs Amp even more reliably, so you could maybe go High Lords with that if you want, or at least Cat's Eye. Cat's Eye is more budget than High Lords, so you know, definitely good options there. G-Face, obviously you should be putting sockets in these if you're going the budget version. More attack speed, whatever attack speed, res, rune, whatever you can get for res would be nice. Ravenfrost, once again, this one just doesn't look as cool as the other one. That's really good. Some source of mana leech is very nice. You might notice I don't even have life leech, except on the belt. String of Ears is really good too. If you had a shale in here, you could go String of Ears and you could actually have damage reduction. Either way, it works pretty well. And then, you know, we have some MF here as well. That's just a pretty cool ring, which is basic. Just has some AR. More AR would actually be nice. More res would be nice, but just having like some mana leech would be nice. You could even use modeled heal if that's all you have. Laying of Hands is not a very expensive item, period, so if you can get a lay in the hands on this version of the build. It's nice. Then any kind of max damage, air, life, res you can cobble together. As you can see, I kind of showed some charms that are lower tier, but they could be even lower tier than this. You can focus just on plain res and then plain MF. I'm not filling up my whole inventory, so some of these really good ones are just simulating having an inventory of just weaker charms. But yeah. And then, you know, Mercenary, I don't know. He's got all this stuff. Mercenary still has Remind Aura. Alright, I think I pretty much showed everything for the starter build. So you probably want to see, can a starter Strafe Zon actually kill things? The answer is yes, of course. And also, we can also have a Harmony as well in whatever bow you find lying around. And as you can see, we could kill things. Wow. Now this is just players 1 to be fair, but you know, you can turn up the player count if you wanted to. But you might notice here our damage is way lower. But hey, you know, you want to play her solo. Not a bad plan. Not a bad plan at all. Very good stuff. Damn. Easy mode. She's strong. Yeah, just an upgraded Bariza. I'm even missing sockets on this build, but it also kind of simulates an even cheaper version of the build. As you can see, Bariza hits really hard. The big weakness is that her frames are a lot worse for sure. Like I said, you could hit even an attack speed frame above this one if you get more attack speed. Oh wait, I should have cast it on my Harmony swap. Oops. Still have her Valkyrie. Still killing Hell Chaos. That one's got... Yeah, that one's got physical resistance. Fortunately, no amp for us there. Ow. That's why you should back up. Alright, but yeah, as you can see though, you could 100% play this build budget as well. Definitely something different. You don't need all those crazy auras, you just need the Mind Aura. Good old fashioned Bariza. Very good stuff. Very, very solid. As you can see though, damage is definitely not insane. Players 8, she's definitely going to struggle a lot more. I mean, we're not really going to show it, but... Not too bad, though. You might be surprised. Our minimum damage isn't that far away from the standard build's minimum damage. So... It could be a lot worse. And there you go. We died. And that's what happens when you don't run out of range. So, yeah, that's actually very instructive there, that death, because as you can see, you're stuck in the strafe animation until you fire all 5 shots. If you don't back up and you just let the monsters attack you in melee range and you don't put your Valkyries or your decoys up, that's what can happen. Standard build, of course, it's a little bit easier to avoid that even without maneuvering, but on this build it's even more important. Got way too lazy there. But yeah, I mean, This build also might struggle a lot more in like World Stone Keep. Doesn't really have the res. The good news about Strafe is you might be thinking, are you draining 5 arrows every time you shoot? No, it's splitting 1 arrow into 5, so every time you fire 5 arrows, you're only using 1 arrow, so that's kind of nice, right? That's going to be a little challenging to hit, right? But notice, if I have Atmas, I can even kill this. That's pretty cool, right? I can even kill physical immunes with the starter version of this build. Anyway. Sure you guys get the idea, though. River of Flame's pretty nice, too. It has decently narrow corridors, but as you can see, right now we're surrounded on 2 sides. Strafe is better when it's kind of firing in one direction. Alright. Well, there you have it. Even killed something behind it we couldn't even see.
Hail to you, champion.
She's quite nice. And of course, I could farm the pit and other starter areas. Eldritch and Shank would be no problem at all. But yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed learning a lot more about this character today. And maybe, hopefully, you're inspired to actually make one. Some people are a bit intimidated by this build because they just think it's crap. I wouldn't put C tier as crap. There's definitely even worse builds that don't do very much at all PvE. This build actually can clear high player count, high density. The more monsters the merrier, actually, because of how Pierce works and how Strafe works in general. So you usually just want more monsters. Oh. Accidentally misclicked there. Okay, anyway. Yeah, so as you can see, though, it's not a joke. You can definitely clear the pit with this build. No problem. I like how I'll have a death, though. That's good, though. You know, that actually shows something, though. Sometimes you learn a lot more from mistakes. You saw what a mistake I made there. I decided to melee mode the monsters when I even had amp on me. Not smart. I don't have a lot of health, you know. This build is not designed to have a lot of health unless you go CTA on a hardcore version of the build. And even then, you could also go even more health, of course. You could always dump more points into vitality. But your damage will suffer. You do need the damage. As you can see, she's not drowning in damage. Unlike some builds, you know. There are builds that definitely require more damage. I'm sorry, there are builds that have like way more damage just naturally. This build definitely takes a bit more to get that damage up to where, you know, it really can shine and thrive even in high player count conditions. And one thing to note about Strafe is you could even use Barizza with Dual Aura if you want, or Barizza with Faith on the Mercenary as well. But the firing is just slower. It would still do a lot of damage. It's a solid damage option for sure. But you'll notice that the Barizza's like base damage is higher. This means you won't have all the auras and crossbow frames, so. Alright, guys. Well, GG. Remember, you guys can check out the timestamps for all the sections we just went over in the description or in the first pinned comment. And of course, this guide will be up on Maxroll. So look forward to seeing it there. If you ever wanted to make a strafe zone and wanted a strong density clearer that could also be safe, reliable, and can even be played pretty dang well with no gear at all, so check this build out. It's definitely one of the more fun density clears in Diablo 2. Yeah, definitely don't rule her out. She's a beast. She's dead on. I actually prefer myself. I prefer personally. I actually prefer the strafe zone to multi-shot, and the reason being is that it hits so much harder in high player count. And it's easy to proc amplify damage, so it can do a lot more damage to a lot more monsters in a greater radius. It provides even more safety by knocking back everything around you, so if a monster comes up from behind you, you have a good tool for it. You can always go 1 point strength, you could always do the reverse, right, and go multi-shot 1 point strafe, but it won't be quite as effective besides against like low HP monsters. Especially mostly just using multi-shot. Multi-shot's very good at clearing low HP monsters, which is why we still have it on this build to begin with. And why, of course, you could still use multi-shot. The only problem, though, is on this budget version, we don't even bother going multi-shot. But on the main version, you could see we had a pretty decent multi-shot going. Very good for tearing through flares and whatnot. Yeah, that's about it, though. That's about it. It's good stuff. Strafe, very powerful, very good. Rips things to shreds, so have fun. Have fun gunning them down. She's straight gangsta, remember that. And don't cross her path for sure. Don't cross the path of arrows. That's a path you don't want to walk. Anyways, hope you guys enjoy this. Remember, you can always catch me at twitch.tv/darkhumanity for 6 to 7 days of Diablo action. Of course, you can also catch the rest of our Diablo 2 guides, including D2R and PD2 guides, and just all kinds of content on our YouTube, which is Dark Humility as well. And of course, always catch all the action. Catch the guide on Maxroll. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this guide. Get it. See you guys next time. Dark Humility. Over and out. Let's get it.